I think we need to be honest about what happened. It was a military operation designed to free Israeli citizens who were being held against their will by Hamas. We can call those people hostages if you want to use that term, prisoners of war if they were military, if they were civilian, hostages. And on the face of it, of course Israel has a right to do that. I know there's the argument, oh, it's an illegal occupier. I use that argument all the time. You can't argue, you can't complain when the enemy, when people resist you and all that kind of stuff. I agree. But if Hamas, the whole purpose of Hamas taking the hostages was to bring them into Gaza and compel Israel to carry out military operations designed to free the hostages. That's what this whole thing is about. And so Israel, this has become a political problem for Israel. And this is what we need to focus on, is the political problem of the hostages. It's been one of the issues that have been hounding the Netanyahu administration. Indeed, as we speak, his government is collapsing around him. Benny Gantz, the Minister of Defense, one of his key political opponents, has left the war cabinet. He's no longer part of the government. He's been followed by at least three others. And this may lead to, Israel being compelled to carry out elections in a time of war. Netanyahu is under a lot of pressure to resign because he's not defeating Hamas. He's not defeating Hezbollah. He's not ending this confrontation. Iran got the better of him, and yet he knows that if he doesn't do something, he's going to have to. It's inevitable that he'll be pushed out. So this operation was designed to buy him time. It was a successful hostage rescue operation. That's how it's being spun. That he, Benjamin Netanyahu, is the brave Israeli leader that will never give up on hostages. This is a tremendous propaganda victory for Israel in Israel. It's something that the Israelis desperately needed as a nation. You look at the videotapes of the lifeguards announcing the rescue over the radio to all the people on the beach in Tel Aviv and how they're cheering and clapping. This is a big deal. This is a much needed boost in the arm from Benjamin Netanyahu, which tells you everything you need to know about why he did it. Because let me tell you this is the worst hostage rescue operation in the history of hostage rescue operations. First of all, there was no military necessity for this operation. It's clear that the four hostages who were released were being well fed. They weren't being tortured. They weren't being raped. They weren't they're being held against their will. And I'm not legitimizing this whatsoever. No matter how much I support the Hamas cause, I understand the reality that if you seize citizens of another nation, don't be surprised when that other nation comes in looking for those citizens through use of force. So, Israel had every right to do what it's doing. But not how it did it. You see, these hostages could have been released through negotiation, the acceptance of a ceasefire. In fact, there's a Security Council just voted in support of the American proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza, one which has a hostage release component built into it. So all Israel had to do, there was no military necessity. These hostages weren't being executed. The only hostages that have died in Hamas are hostages who died because Israel fired missiles through. One of the surviving hostages talk about that, how she knows that Israeli missiles killed Israeli hostages. The only hostages that died at the hands of the Israeli Defense Force. All of these hostages could have been released simply by Israel agreeing to a ceasefire on terms that bring about an end to the conflict. Israel wouldn't do this. So you can't speak of military necessity. There was political necessity, and that's never a justification. Just because Benjamin Netanyahu needs a shot in the arm doesn't ever justify this. What made this assault a crime? Under international humanitarian law, under the laws of war, under the Geneva Conventions, proportionality is a factor that has to be brought into play when talking about carrying out strikes that could result in civilian casualties. The law of war doesn't say that you can't kill civilians. What it says is that the losses of civilians must be in proportion to the military gain achieved by the operation. And since I already told you there was no military imperative here, no military gain, that means that no civilians could be killed. There's no reason to kill any, let alone over 200, plus. I mean, I don't know what the exact number is now. It's over 240, I think, dead. No, that's unacceptable. And it's not just, here's the interesting thing, it's not just me saying this or the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court. In 2004, the Israeli Supreme Court talked about proportionality, saying that Israel doesn't have a right to go in and carry out operations that will result in, significant civilian life, and ignore the proportionality question. And so we have a massive war crime that took place. There's no defending this whatsoever. There's not a court of jurisdiction that, if it took up this case, wouldn't find against Israel here, because literally there's no aspect of this that meets the proportionality aspect of it. But there's also what this did to America and the reputation of the United States. I don't think there's a person out here who follows this, who looked at what America was doing with this pier off the coast of Gaza and said, that's a brilliant idea. Why didn't I drink the V8 and get this one, man? If I had just drinking a V8, I could have come up with this idea, and it's genius. I mean, let's spend $340 some odd million and build a pier where we could get humanitarian stuff to come off, and it goes to the Palestinian people. But, oh, wait, it doesn't really, does it? Because there's not too much to come off. The pier is very fragile. Windstorm comes up, pier gets washed away. All knowable events. Guys, go study the Battle of Normandy. We just had the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Normandy. And study the concept of mulberry harbors and what that means, protecting, artificial man-made piers or jetties from weather. Right after D-Day, the weather came in and swept away, blew up the mulberry harbors, and screwed up the whole offloading that was supposed to take place. We know that it's almost impossible to do that. I'll give away something about my background too. In the lead up to the Gulf War, I was on a planning cell working directly for the Commandant of the Marine Corps to plan combat options, amphibious warfare options for the Marine Corps, because General Schwarzkopf at that time had 2 Marine divisions assigned, and his whole thing was put the Marines right up against the strongest Iraqi defenses and charge straight into the lines. Now, Marines aren't cowards. We've done this before. We could do it. But, we sat there and went, we really don't want to build another Iwo Jima memorial about the Iraq War. There's got to be a better way to use Marines, where instead of putting us on the ground like 2 Army divisions, we're an amphibious force. And so one of my concepts, actually it was a concept that I came up with, was to take a core-sized element and insert it on the Al-Faw Peninsula and then advance rapidly into the Iraqi rear, cutting off the Al-Zubair logistics base from Baghdad to the Kuwaiti forces, putting them in the horns of a dilemma where if they left their trenches, they'd get bombed. If they stayed in place, they'd starve to death. Classic amphibious operation kind of stuff. And the problem we had was there's no port facility. There's Qasr, but that easily mined, etc. How do you get Marines over the beach fast enough, ready to fight? I came up with the idea that we're going to build. This is actually a pretty clever idea. I'm pretty proud of it. We're going to build a pier, but the way we're going to build the pier is you take what's called a roll-on, roll-off ship, and you take the first roll-on, roll-off ship. On that ship, you have a Marine rifle company already lined up in its combat march order. And that ship comes in and runs aground on the beach. Seabees come out and improve that front, and then the companies ride off. Now, roll-on, roll-off allows vehicles to enter the back and roll out the front. And then behind it comes another roll-on, roll-off that comes in and links up with this one. And that company leaves its ship, goes on the other ship in. We're building a pier, and we just keep lining them up all the way across there it is. And we have 3 of these things because you need, things. And this came up in the mind of a stupid captain. And it passed muster. Everybody said it was genius. We're going to do it. But one of the things we were concerned about was whether, okay, we got these ships all linked up like some giant centipede. And what happens if the weather comes in and just blows the crap away? And I didn't have the answer for that. My answer was we need to basically get a division on shore and have a regiment peel off and secure Qasr. And then we would use the Qasr port facilities. And that was the plan because we didn't have time to build a Mulberry Harbor to protect it. If bad weather had come in, it could have caused problems. But what I'm trying to point out is that people who do this for a living plan these things. We know what the history of military operations are. And anybody sitting there trying to put a pier off of Gaza has to know about weather, has to know about tidal surges, has to know about every aspect of it. That's why we have, intelligence officers who are supposed to have tasked divers to go in and put in sensors and check the water flow and check everything out and make sure that all the calculations are done so the pier is done. It's the dumbest idea in the world to put this pier in, which now you have to ask the question, well, why did they put the pier in? Because the pier is ideally located to gather intelligence against Hamas, to provide an observation platform into areas of Gaza where you can do visual observation and you can do technical surveillance of this. And it's done by the United States in coordination with Israeli intelligence. It's also a perfect staging ground. We talk about getting humanitarian goods in there, but it allows vehicles to be staged that operate under the cover of humanitarian operations. We know that the Israelis used humanitarian vehicles to deploy their troops. One of the trucks was designed to mimic the transfer of displaced persons, that move around. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Israelis probably rehearsed this, meaning they sent, fake runs through the area just to get the locals used to seeing this kind of vehicle moving. But this came off of the pier. So the Israeli forces deployed to the pier disguised as American forces, and then they fell in on these vehicles, and they deployed. And the United States had to have been involved in the command and control of the logistics, the planning of this. So the United States was involved in this operation that turned into a war crime because they slaughtered over 220 civilians to rescue 4 hostages. They killed at least 3 other hostages. If this had been an American operation, I can guarantee you that there would be a congressional inquiry and there would be court-martials of the officers in charge. This was not a military success, not at all. They killed 3 hostages, one of whom is an American. I don't know why the United States Congress isn't outraged. The one question I would ask is, how did this come to be? Did we know the Israelis were going in after an American citizen? What measures did we do to protect this American? Why did we allow the Israelis to carry out a military operation to rescue an American citizen when, if they simply did the ceasefire, this person could have been freed without any harm? And then the final one is, why did we allow the Israelis to commit war crimes? And here's the interesting part. Nobody's talking about this. There's something called the Leahy Law, named after the former senator, I believe, from the state of Vermont. I could be wrong on that one, Patrick Leahy. The Leahy Law prevents America from providing money to military units of a nation that we're providing support to, who have committed what are known as gross violation of human rights. Well, what happened in this hostage rescue is a gross violation of human rights. So all of the elite Israeli special forces units, Yaman, Sayed Matkal, there's a number of others that were involved in this. All of those now, by law, by American law, have to be reviewed because if they committed gross violation of humanitarian of human rights, which they did by disregarding the notion of proportionality then we can't give them money. We can't work with them. We have to ostracize them. Is this happening? The answer is no. See, America ignores its laws, and now we come to the final outcome of this. This has destroyed the reputation of the United States as an impartial arbiter. We can never again be trusted. We can only be seen as unilaterally supporting Israel across the board. When we create an object, a pier, that we say is for humanitarian purposes, and then we use it for military purposes, who can trust us again? This was a one-time operation. They're not going to be able to launch another operation like this using this pier. This was a one-of, which means you have to question then, what about this was so important? Was it really so important to get 4 hostages rescued when over 120 remain in captivity? And the answer is yes, from a political standpoint. This was an act of political desperation by Benjamin Netanyahu. He was so desperate that he basically burned the pier. The pier can't be used like this anymore, and it really can't be used as an intelligence gathering thing, because your visual observations now have to operate under the assumption that Hamas knows they're being watched. Therefore, what you're seeing is probably deception. And the signals, likewise, false signals are going to be coming, complicating your analysis. We compromised the whole thing for the worst hostage rescue mission in modern Israel.
Dòng tin nhắn chia tay đi em nói ngay ra khi lúc anh đang nghĩ chuyện tình mình đẹp. Thật ngu ngốc khi anh luôn khiến mình tự suy tự diễn. Vậy nhưng nếu em không yêu thì nói ngay ra khi lúc anh trao cho em tình này. Mọi cảm xúc em cho anh đều ra số nỗi đau càng điên cuồng hơn. Và cuối cùng là mây trên cao chẳng thể kéo nàng về. Bao nhiêu kỳ vọng úa tàn gục ngã trước ngàn mây bay. Và tiếng mưa rơi ngàn đôi chân anh chẳng thể tiếp tục. Ván cờ sắp xếp hết rồi thì anh chấp nhận thua thôi.
Đáng lý lúc đó em nên từ chối anh. Ngay từ lần đầu anh thốt lên câu nói yêu em đầu môi. Hắn hứa sẽ cho em được hạnh phúc sao? Anh cũng mong vậy. Em đã muốn đi, vậy thì đau đừng tìm anh nữa. Em rời đi khô tay mọi thứ kỷ niệm dần biến tàn. Em chẳng biết cuộc sống của anh nơi đây vẫn ngổn ngang. Không tồn tại một thứ duy nhất là gọi là chân lý. Baby, anh không chịu được nữa, quay lại mau đi. Coi anh không đáng đưa cạnh em, làm mọi chuyện vỡ tan cũng như điều em muốn. Hai giọt lệ tuôn.
Và cuối cùng là mây trên cao chẳng thể kéo nàng về. Bao nhiêu kỳ vọng úa tàn gục ngã trước ngàn mây bay. Và tiếng mưa rơi ngàn đôi chân anh chẳng thể tiếp tục. Ván cờ sắp xếp hết rồi thì anh chấp nhận thua thôi.